The hidden burden of men is not simply the weight of responsibility, but the refusal to share that weight, to transmute the struggle into wisdom and progress. A man can carry heavy loads if he understands that strength comes no. Have you ever wondered why the strongest-looking men, the ones who stand tall in silence, often carry the heaviest burdens deep inside their souls without uttering a single word about it? The world applauds them for their strength, for their ability to endure, and for their power to keep moving forward without complaint. Yet what the world fails to see is that silence is often a mask. And behind that mask lives a man who wrestles daily with doubts, fears, and responsibilities that no one else can even imagine. The burden of a man is rarely measured by what he speaks, but by what he holds within. Himself, he is expected to provide, to protect, to lead, to be unshakable in the face of storms. And when he falters even for a moment, society judges him as weak. So he learns early to bury his pain deep where no one can reach it. This hidden burden becomes a silent chain around his mind. He walks through life appearing strong, yet each step is heavy with invisible weight. Napoleon Hill often spoke about the power of thought and how it shapes every man's reality. What we think about, we bring about, but when those thoughts are soaked in suppressed fear, doubt, and anxiety, they build an unseen prison around the mind. A man who carries pain in silence is like a river dammed up the water. Still flows beneath the surface, but the pressure grows stronger and stronger until it threatens to burst the illusion of strength, hides the truth that silence can be both a shield and a poison. Men are taught from their earliest days that emotions are weakness. They hear phrases like "real men don't cry," "stand tall," and "never show fear." Those words may seem harmless in youth, but they sink into the subconscious mind and become iron laws by which he lives adulthood. Then becomes a stage where he plays the role of the unbreakable pillar. He provides, he protects, he solves problems. But who carries his burden when his shoulders grow weary? He convinces himself that asking for help is defeat, so he digs deeper into silence, believing that endurance alone defines his value. But the truth is, silence is a double-edged sword. On one side, it gives a man dignity, composure, and calmness under pressure. On the other, it eats away at him slowly like fire burning beneath the ashes. It leaves no outward scars, yet inside it destroys his peace, his confidence, and even his dreams. The man who cannot share his struggles begins to believe he must face them alone, and that belief becomes his greatest enemy, for no man was ever meant to carry the world in isolation. Napoleon Hill taught that every adversity, every pain, every hidden challenge carries within it the seed of equal or greater benefit, but only if the man is willing to confront it, to understand it, and to direct it toward growth. When he suffers in silence, he never discovers the hidden opportunity inside his pain because he is too focused on concealing it rather than transforming it. His silence keeps him chained to the problem instead of freeing him to seek the solution. The hidden burden of men is not simply the weight of responsibility, but the refusal to share that weight, to transmute the struggle into wisdom and progress. A man can carry heavy loads if he understands that strength comes not from hiding, but from channeling his inner battles into creative thought, purposeful action, and determined persistence. The world may see his silence as strength, but real power comes when he learns that his mind, not his silence, is his greatest weapon. When he takes control of his thoughts, he takes control of his destiny. The burden does not destroy the man, it is the way he chooses to carry it that defines his fate. Silence, when guided by discipline and purpose, can give him clarity, but silence born of fear and suppression will crush him from within. Every man must learn that his inner world will always shape his outer one, and the hidden burdens he refuses to face will always dictate the limits of his success. The strongest men are not those who never show weakness, they are the ones who transform their silent suffering into fuel for greatness. They rise not by hiding from their struggles, but by mastering them, and in mastering them, they master themselves and claim the true strength that no silence can ever conceal. The burden of silence is not merely emotional. It is physical, mental, and spiritual. For when a man suppresses his pain, he chains his energy to the weight of that secrecy. The human mind was not designed to store unexpressed torment. It was designed to process, to transform, and to release every thought. Every emotion carries a vibration. And when unspoken suffering lingers, it lowers the vibration of the entire being, leading to fatigue, illness, and the slow decay of ambition. Napoleon Hill often warned that the subconscious mind works constantly, taking in the dominating thoughts of the conscious mind. If those thoughts are filled with fear, shame, or hidden sorrow, then the subconscious multiplies those patterns and brings forth more of the same circumstances into reality. Thus, the man who suffers in silence unconsciously attracts more suffering. The man who hides his struggles believes he is preserving his dignity, but in truth he is mortgaging his future. For the illusion of pride, pride built upon silence, is a fragile structure. It cracks under pressure and collapses at the moment it is most needed. True dignity is not in hiding one's weaknesses, but in mastering them, transforming them, and using them as stepping stones toward strength. The silence that men embrace becomes their enemy because it denies them access to the law of association. One of the greatest principles of success, Hill revealed that no man rises to greatness without allies, advisors, and confidants. Yet, how can a man receive help if he refuses to admit his need for it? Suffering thrives in the dark, but the moment it is exposed to light, it begins to lose its grip. Consider the fire within a furnace. When it is sealed with no ventilation, it suffocates, but when air flows through, it grows stronger. So it is with the soul. When it keeps its burdens sealed, it weakens, but when it releases them through expression, through dialogue, through shared wisdom, it gains strength and clarity. Silence deprives the soul of oxygen, and without oxygen, the fire of ambition flickers and dies. When a man remains silent in his suffering, he also denies others. The chance to grow for life is not only about what we achieve, but what we give to others. Every time a man shares his experience, his trials, his fears, he becomes a bridge for another soul who might be enduring the same storm. His courage to speak becomes another's courage. To endure his honesty becomes another's healing. To stay silent is to rob not only oneself, but the countless others who could be lifted by the truth. The law of success demands expression. It demands that thoughts be translated into action. And silence is the enemy of action, for silence traps thought in the mind, where it breeds doubt and indecision. The man who suffers in silence delays his progress and postpones his destiny. Time is the one asset that cannot be replaced. And every day lost to silent suffering is a day stolen from the life of greatness that could have been lived. Hill taught that every adversity carries within it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. But that seed must be planted, nurtured, and spoken into reality. A man who remains silent buries that seed deep underground where it can never sprout. The cure for silent suffering is courage. The courage to speak, to express, to release, to transform. It is not weakness to admit struggle. It is strength to confront it and wisdom to learn from it. Men who break their silence align themselves with truth. And truth is always the foundation of power. The man who dares to voice his burden begins the process of liberation. And in liberation, he discovers energy, clarity, and vision that were once chained by silence. This is the man who will rise above suffering and step into the life of purpose, wealth, and freedom. That is his rightful inheritance. The greatest tragedies of men's lives are not always found in the battles they fight openly, but in the wars they fight alone behind closed doors, for it is in silence that many men become prisoners of their own thoughts, trapped in the belief that to show vulnerability is to forfeit respect. The world has taught men that tears are weakness, that confession is failure, and that silence is nobility. But this deception has created a generation of men who carry invisible wounds, wounds that grow deeper each day. They go unspoken. Napoleon Hill taught that every thought held in the mind long enough seeks to clothe itself in reality. And when men suppress their pain and fears, those thoughts ferment in the subconscious, producing outcomes of misery, stagnation, and despair. Silence becomes the architect of defeat. A man who suffers in silence robs himself of the very law of success, which is built upon expression and release. Thought must be given direction. it must be converted into constructive action. Otherwise, it festers and corrodes the mind. When fear, doubt, or pain are locked away, they do not vanish. They multiply. A man may smile to the world, but within himself he is torn by conflict. His energy is divided between the mask he wears and the reality he hides. This division is the greatest enemy of power, because true power requires harmony between thought and action. The man who hides his struggle fights against himself, and this inner war consumes the strength he could have used to build his dream. Silence not only weakens the individual, but it blinds him to opportunity. How can a man recognize his allies if he never admits his battles? How can he attract assistance, guidance, or inspiration if he insists on projecting an image of perfection? No seed grows in isolation. It requires soil, sunlight, and water. Likewise, the seed of greatness within a man requires interaction with others. It requires counsel, encouragement, and shared wisdom. But silence keeps him in the shadows where no light can reach him and no growth can occur. Hill declared that definiteness of purpose is the starting point of all achievement. Yet purpose loses clarity when the mind is clouded by suppressed emotions and unexpressed burdens. A man who cannot share his struggles cannot fully commit to his purpose, because part of him is always holding back, hiding, doubting, fearing what others may think. That hesitation weakens his faith, and faith is the very force that transforms dreams into reality. The silent man becomes trapped in a cycle where fear of judgment keeps him silent, and silence fuels more fear. There is no shame in struggle, for struggle is the training ground of strength. The shame lies only in the refusal to confront it, the refusal to voice it, the refusal to release it. Men must learn that speaking their truth does not reduce their power. It multiplies it. For every time a man expresses what weighs him down, he lightens his load and clears space in his mind for new thoughts, greater visions, and stronger determination. Silence is not the protector of masculinity. It is its destroyer. The world does not need men who pretend to be invincible. It needs men who are willing to be authentic, courageous, and real, for only then can they live in harmony with the law of success and rise above the silent suffering that has kept them chained to mediocrity. Men are taught from a young age that strength means endurance, that real power means carrying the load without complaint, and that to admit pain is to admit weakness. But this conditioning has enslaved countless men into a prison of their own silence. It forces them to swallow their emotions, to deny their fears, and to hide their struggles even when the weight becomes unbearable. Society applauds the image of the unshakable man, but it rarely considers the cost of that image on his soul. The truth is, silence may look like strength to the outside world, but to the man himself, it becomes a slow poison, draining his energy, his creativity, and his very will to live. When a man suffers in silence, he builds walls around his own heart walls, so thick that no one can reach him. And he convinces himself that no one would understand even if he tried to explain. This isolation magnifies his suffering, because what is hidden grows in power. Napoleon Hill taught that thoughts are things, and unexpressed thoughts are the most dangerous of all. When a man continually feeds his subconscious mind with worry, doubt, and fear, but never releases them through words or action, those negative thoughts sink deep into his mental soil, and from that soil they bear bitter fruit. The silent sufferer finds himself battling with anxiety, indecision, and lack of faith in himself, not because he is weak, but because he has allowed the weeds of silence to overtake the garden of his mind. There is a high price for silence that extends far beyond emotions. It seeps into every area of life. A man who cannot speak of his struggles will find it difficult to lead others with authenticity. He will find it difficult to connect deeply in relationships, and he will find it almost impossible to channel his full creative power into his work because his energy is divided. One part of him is attempting to achieve progress, while another part is constantly suppressing the voice within that cries out for release. This division of energy robs him of his greatest asset, which is concentration. Hill reminded us that concentration is the key to success. Yet how can a man concentrate on his purpose when part of his mind is chained by silence? Many men believe that to reveal their struggles is to burden others, but the opposite is true. Sharing pain creates bonds and deepens trust. It allows others to step forward with their own truths. And in doing so, both parties grow stronger in wisdom and resilience. When a man dares to speak his truth, he discovers that he is not alone, and that realization is powerful. It breaks the illusion that he must carry his burdens in solitude. It reminds him that true power is not in pretending to be invincible, but in daring to be real. And from that authenticity comes the kind of strength that inspires others. Silence is not strength. Silence is avoidance, and avoidance is a slow death to ambition, dreams, and purpose. The man who continues to hide behind his mask eventually loses touch with who he really is, and the world loses the gifts he could have given. But the man who dares to break the silence, chooses to face his struggles, openly finds within himself a reservoir of power he never knew existed. He transforms adversity into wisdom, pain into purpose, and vulnerability into victory. And in that moment, he learns one of life's greatest truths, that no man is truly strong until he has faced himself and chosen honesty over illusion. The reason many men continue to suffer in silence is because society has built an image of masculinity that equates emotion with weakness, and for generations, men have been trained to play a role rather than to live authentically. They are told to provide, protect, and perform, but never to reveal the inner storms that rage within their minds. This conditioning forces them to wear a mask of strength, even when they are breaking inside, and as a result, they retreat into isolation where their struggles echo louder than ever, because silence is not relief, it is an amplifier of pain. When a man hides his struggles, he convinces himself that he is being strong, that he is sparing those around him from unnecessary worry. But in truth, he is creating distance between himself and the people who might have been his allies in overcoming those struggles. Napoleon Hill taught that the subconscious mind magnifies whatever is impressed upon it repeatedly. And when men bottle up their fears, doubts, and sorrows, those unspoken thoughts grow like weeds that choke out creativity, clarity, and confidence. What begins as a single suppressed worry soon multiplies into a forest of inner chaos. And this chaos eventually manifests in poor decisions, broken relationships, and missed opportunities. The tragedy is that the silence is often unnecessary because the world is not destroyed by a man who admits his humanity. On the contrary, people are drawn to authenticity, they respect vulnerability, and they find courage in the fact that even those they look up to have struggles. But the silent sufferer denies himself that relief. He denies himself the healing that comes from speaking truth. And instead, he pours his energy into maintaining an image, into playing a role. And the longer he plays it, the more he loses touch with his true self. The cost of silence is not only emotional, it is financial and spiritual as well. Because when a man lives under the weight of unspoken burdens, he cannot think at his highest potential. Hill emphasized that wealth and success are first born in the mind. But a mind clouded by repressed emotions cannot concentrate. It cannot plan. It cannot take decisive action. It becomes timid, hesitant, and distracted. The opportunities that once surrounded him now pass by unnoticed because his attention is consumed by the battle he refuses to fight. Openly, silence becomes a thief that robs him of the riches of life. There is also a false pride in silence, a belief that endurance without expression is noble. But there is nothing noble in self-destruction. There is nothing honorable in carrying a burden alone until it crushes the very spirit needed to achieve greatness. True strength is not in hiding pain, but in facing it and transforming it into a driving force for growth. Every man must understand that his silence does not protect his family, his silence does not shield his friends, it only creates invisible walls that keep him apart from those who could stand beside him. The transformation begins when a man decides to break free from this destructive pattern. When he refuses to let outdated ideas of strength dictate his life, and when he learns that power comes not from denial, but from mastery, suffering in silence is defeat, suffering with purpose is education, teaches resilience, wisdom, and discipline. The choice lies in whether one will allow silence to bury his potential or whether he will speak his truth and rise above it. Napoleon Hill's greatest lesson was that every adversity carries within it the seed of equal or greater benefit. But to claim that benefit, one must first face the adversity head-on, not in silence, but in courage and determination. The reason so many men suffer in silence lies in the conditioning that begins at the earliest stages of life. A boy is rarely told it is acceptable to cry or to speak openly about what troubles his heart. Instead, he is told to toughen up, to be strong, to hide his weakness, because weakness is painted as failure, and so he grows into manhood. With the belief that to speak of his struggles is to betray his role, he learns to build walls around his heart, walls that may protect him from judgment, but walls that also imprison his spirit. The burden becomes heavier with time, and while the world may admire his composure, the cost is often invisible suffering. Napoleon Hill taught that every thought, whether expressed or suppressed, takes root in the subconscious mind and shapes the destiny of the one who harbors it. When a man hides his pain, he is not destroying it. He is planting it deep within himself and watering it daily with silence. That silence becomes the fertile ground where fear grows. Fear of being seen as inadequate, fear of failing those who depend on him, fear of not living up to the image of strength the world demands from him over time. Those fears multiply until they dominate his thinking, and the man who once had the capacity to dream now spends his energy simply enduring. The tragedy of silent suffering is that it robs men of their greatest weapon, the ability to think clearly and creatively. When the mind is clouded by hidden worry, it cannot function at its highest capacity. It cannot concentrate on building wealth or achieving purpose because it is shackled by the weight of unspoken burdens. And yet the truth Hill revealed is that every burden carries within it the seed of equal or greater advantage. If a man dares to face his suffering and give it a voice, he can transform it into fuel for growth. Silence does not have to be his prison, it can be his place of planning, but only if he learns to use it wisely. A man who refuses to break his silence often convinces himself that he is protecting others by carrying everything alone. He tells himself he is being noble by withholding his fears. So his family or his friends do not worry yet. What he does not see is that his unspoken struggle leaks into his behavior, into his temper, into his lack of joy, into his inability to connect deeply with those he loves. Silence may shield others from his words, but it cannot shield them from the energy he radiates, and eventually the burden he hides becomes a barrier between him and the very people he is trying to protect. True strength is not in hiding pain, but in mastering it by transforming it into wisdom and direction. No man is diminished by admitting his struggle. He is diminished only when he allows the struggle to consume him without action. Hill emphasized that the most powerful men in history were those who learned to direct their inner battles toward the creation of something greater. They took the energy of suffering and transmuted it into determination, resilience, and vision. Suffering in silence without transformation leads only to defeat, but suffering that is acknowledged and used as fuel becomes the foundation of greatness. The silence that breaks men is not the silence of meditation or discipline. It is the silence of repression, the kind that suffocates ambition and corrodes confidence. The cure is not endless words of complaint, but the courage to face oneself with honesty, to look directly at the fears, the doubts, and the pains, and then to decide that those forces will not dictate the course of life. A man who suffers in silence remains a prisoner. A man who transforms silence into strength becomes the master of his destiny and writes his own story of triumph over the inner chains that once held him back. The silent struggle of men lies in the unspoken expectations that surround their lives. From the moment they are old enough to understand their role in the world, they are told they must be strong, they must never falter, they must carry the load of responsibility without hesitation. They are told their worth is measured not by what they feel, but by what they produce, by how much they can endure, and by how well they can protect and provide for those they love. These expectations become the silent chains that bind them, because while the world praises their strength, it rarely stops to ask what it costs them to uphold that image of strength. A man wakes each morning with the invisible weight of duty on his shoulders. He may smile, he may laugh, he may carry himself as if everything is in order, but within him there often exists a storm of doubt, fear, and exhaustion that he cannot voice. Society has taught him that to speak of his pain is weakness, that to admit struggle is to risk being judged as less than a man. So he swallows his fears and walks forward in silence. Napoleon Hill wrote that thoughts held in the mind have a power far greater than the world acknowledges. The mind becomes what it feeds upon. And when a man feeds his mind with silence, when he buries pain deep inside without transforming it, those hidden thoughts begin to shape his destiny in destructive ways. The tragedy is not in the weight he carries, but in his belief that he must carry it alone. The world applauds him when he holds everything together. Yet the world does not see that the foundation beneath him grows weaker each day. The silence men carry becomes like a seed planted deep in the subconscious. It does not vanish. It grows into anxiety, into restlessness, into a sense of unworthiness. It eats away at his ability to dream boldly, because his mind is already consumed with holding back the tide of unspoken pain. And yet within every silent struggle lies a hidden opportunity. Hill often taught that adversity is never a curse unless a man refuses to use it as fuel for his advancement. Silence in itself is not evil when used with wisdom. It can give a man the power of discipline, focus, and control, but when silence becomes a prison, it robs him of the very energy he needs to grow. The man who suffers in silence without ever seeking understanding or transformation condemns himself to live half a life. He walks through his days fulfilling the outer duties, but inside he is unfulfilled, unseen, and unheard. A man's silent struggle is not a sign of weakness. It is proof of his humanity. But his greatness comes only when he decides to turn that inner battle into creative power. When he realizes that silence should be the soil in which solutions are born, not the coffin where dreams are buried. Every fear, every doubt, every moment of pain can be transmuted into strength. If he dares to confront it instead of conceal it, men must learn that strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the ability to transform vulnerability into wisdom and direction. The silent struggle ends when a man understands that his mind is the master key to all his chains. When he chooses new thoughts, when he disciplines his inner world, he begins to break free. He no longer hides behind silence out of fear, but uses silence as a weapon of clarity, a place where he can design his destiny rather than suffocate in secrecy. The truth is, no man was ever meant to be unbreakable. He was meant to be unshakable, and there is a profound difference. Unbreakable men hide their wounds until they collapse. Unshakable men face their wounds and use them to rise higher. The silent struggle is the test. The transformation is the reward. And the man who learns this truth writes his name among the great ones who turned silence into power and suffering into greatness.